Welcome to MHS Midnight Horror Stories. If this is your first time visiting the channel, feel free to introduce yourself in the comments. Tell us where you're watching from and what time it is for you. And now just relax, get comfortable, listen to tonight's horror stories.
My name is Maya. This story happened in 2017 when I was a carefree college junior living in Boston. Back then, I had just moved out of the dorms and into a cheap apartment. I was so proud of my independence, until that terrifying night. After a week of drowning in essays, I finally crashed and fell into a deep, exhausted sleep. But it wasn't peaceful. I had a nightmare about being hunted in the dark. I kept running until I hit a dead end, waking up right as the thing chasing me was about to grab me. I sat up, heart pounding, drenched in sweat. I felt sticky and cold, which made me feel incredibly uneasy. I checked the clock. It was barely 3 a.m. In my half-awake state, I figured I needed to do something to shake off the adrenaline from the nightmare. I decided to take a bath. I put on some chill music on my phone and stepped into the tub. It felt amazing. I leaned back, sank into the warm water, and finally started to relax. A few minutes passed. A new song started playing, but the melody was a bit too gloomy. It didn't fit the vibe I wanted, so I reached my hand outside the shower curtain to grab my phone, planning to skip to something more upbeat. Right as my finger was about to touch the glass screen, I froze. The dark surface of the phone was acting like a mirror, reflecting what was behind the shower curtain. Someone was standing perfectly still, facing the curtain, watching me. Sheer panic gripped my throat. I tried to think. I was completely vulnerable and I didn't have a weapon. In such a small space, the intruder could easily overpower me. Using a level of calm I still don't understand to this day, I forced myself not to gasp. My left hand continued to hover over the phone as if I were just browsing for music, but my right hand silently reached up and turned the shower dial to the hottest setting possible. My heart was beating so hard I could hear the blood rushing in my ears. When I felt the water at my feet begin to steam, I took a deep breath. It was now or never. I suddenly ripped the curtain open and swung the shower head toward the intruder, spraying a blast of scalding water directly into their face. A blood-curdling scream filled the room, and I was shocked to realize it was a woman. She stumbled back, clutching her face with both hands. I didn't waste a second. I bolted out of the bathroom, only stopping to wrap a towel around myself. I ran through the living room toward the kitchen. My only thought was to find a knife to defend myself if she followed me. I frantically yanked open drawers, but I couldn't find a single knife. The sound of heavy footsteps and angry moans coming from the bathroom got closer. Pure terror took over, and I gave up the search. I couldn't find the knife. I sprinted out the front door, ran for my life down the hallway, and screamed for help. Luckily, my neighbor across the hall was still awake. She opened her door and pulled me inside just before the intruder could reach the handle. The police arrived 10 minutes later. They led out a woman with messy gray hair, a blistered face, and eyes filled with a haunting, crazed look. She didn't fight them. She just muttered nonsense about taking back what belonged to her. After checking her ID and talking to the landlord, an officer came to speak with me. He confirmed her name was Glenda. She wasn't a random burglar. She used to live in my apartment before being forced out a year ago due to severe mental health issues. The terrifying part was that she had kept a copy of the key and had been sneaking back in at night, acting like the apartment was still her home. What truly made my blood run cold was what the officer did next. He slowly held up an evidence bag. Inside was the very knife I had been frantically searching for in the kitchen. The officer looked at the knife with a serious expression. It looks like she was determined to take this place back by any means. We found this right on the bathroom floor. I went numb. I realized that while I was relaxing in the tub, that woman had been standing right behind the curtain holding a knife. She had been silently watching me, waiting for the right moment to strike. If I hadn't happened to look at my phone screen, or if I hadn't stayed calm enough to use the hot water, I might have been the lead story on the morning news. The police left as the sun was coming up. I went back inside, locked the door, and just stared at the deadbolt. I had been so careless. I had skipped changing the locks just to save a few dollars, and it almost cost me my life. I had every lock replaced that morning and installed security cameras at the door. I didn't move out because I liked the apartment, but everything felt different. That night taught me a lesson. You should never bargain with your safety. One small decision, like not changing a lock, is all it takes to leave the door wide open for disaster. My name is Roger. My small family, consisting of my wife and our 7-year-old son Ryan, lives a peaceful life in Colorado. That peace lasted until the birthday gift I gave Ryan accidentally set off a chain of events that nearly made my heart stop from pure terror. For Ryan's 7th birthday, I bought him a laptop. I thought it was the perfect gift, something to help him get used to technology and support his schoolwork. Ryan was overjoyed. His eyes lit up and he looked at me like I was a hero. My wife was a little surprised since I hadn't discussed it with her first, but seeing the smile on his face, she happily accepted it. From that day on, Ryan started spending more time on his laptop. At first, we didn't think it was a big deal. He still finished his homework and ate his meals, but after dinner, he would usually ask to go to his room to play games. We agreed, as long as he stopped playing by 9 o'clock. We often heard happy laughter echoing from Ryan's room. Whenever I walked past his door, I'd see him focused on the screen, laughing and having a great time. One night, when I went in to remind him it was bedtime, I heard him say, "Yeah, let's play again tomorrow. Tonight was so much fun." Curious, I asked him about it. Ryan excitedly told me he had made a friend in the game and they had just finished an important mission together. "What's your friend's name? Is it a boy or a girl?" I asked. "Marcus, Dad. He's a boy," Ryan replied. I nodded and told him to get some sleep. I was just happy to see him making friends. Everything went smoothly until one fateful night. My wife and I were sitting in the living room watching the news. Suddenly, an emergency alert flashed on the screen, and the atmosphere in the room turned ice cold. The police were searching for a dangerous online predator who targeted children through gaming platforms. His face appeared on the screen along with his name, Marcus Weldon, 42 years old. I bolted upright. "Marcus!" I repeated the name, which left my wife looking confused. I quickly told her that Ryan had mentioned a new friend named Marcus in his game. Without saying another word, we both ran up to his room. I kicked the door open, startling Ryan. "Who are you talking to? Is it someone named Marcus?" I barked, my voice thick with panic. "Yeah, my friend Marcus from the game. Why are you guys—" I didn't wait for him to finish. I snatched the laptop out of his hands and shut it down immediately. Ryan started to cry, but his safety was more important than any tears. We confiscated the computer and gave him a stern warning that he was never to talk to strangers again. That night, neither my wife nor I could close our eyes. We lived in absolute terror, wondering if that criminal had already gotten our address or other information from our innocent son. The next evening, while we were eating dinner, the doorbell suddenly rang. To our surprise, Ryan stood up with a calm face and said, "That's my friend from the game. He didn't forget our hangout tonight." Before we could stop him, he excitedly headed toward the door. My wife and I looked at each other in horror. My fatherly instincts took over instantly. I stood up and sternly ordered Ryan to stay exactly where he was. I walked toward the front door, my heart pounding against my ribs. The doorbell rang again, more insistently this time. Was this guy actually challenging us at our own home? Even though my wife told me to call 911, I kept going. I was ready to fight and do whatever it took to protect my family. I threw the door open, tensed and ready for a confrontation. Even though I had prepared myself, I froze. Standing in front of me was a giant of a man. He was at least 6 feet 5 inches, with broad shoulders and muscles bulging under his shirt. I'm usually confident in my own size, but standing in front of him made me feel small. Still, I didn't back down. I stood tall and kept my fists clenched. "Who are you? What do you want?" I hissed through my teeth, staying in a defensive stance. Before the man could answer, a small, shy head popped out from behind his massive legs. It was a little boy who looked to be exactly Ryan's age. "Excuse me, is this Ryan's house?" The man asked in a deep but polite voice. "I'm David, and this is my son, Marcus." From behind me, Ryan let out an excited scream. "Marcus!" He pushed past me and gave the other boy a huge hug. I stood there like a statue, my fists slowly unclencing. David looked at me, and he seemed to read the extreme tension on my face. He sighed and gave me a sympathetic smile. "My son told me he made friends with your boy online. He said they had a play date tonight. You know how it is these days. The internet is full of bad people. I wanted to make sure everything was safe, so I came along as his bodyguard." As it turned out, David was a worried father just like me. He was so concerned about his son meeting a predator that he personally escorted him to make sure the friend was actually a kid. The coincidence of the name Marcus matching the criminal on the news had created a horror movie scenario in my head. The terror vanished, replaced by a sense of relief that was almost funny. We invited David and his son inside. The two kids were allowed to play games together, but this time they sat side by side on the sofa instead of talking through a screen. Meanwhile, David and I, two overprotective dads, sat and had a drink, sharing the stresses of raising kids in the digital age. I still believe the internet is useful but full of risks, especially for children. Parents can't watch their kids every single second, but we can't just let our guard down either. The most important thing is to stay involved, listen, and teach our kids how to protect themselves.
We were sitting around eating, drinking, and chatting happily on a corpse. I'm Bradley, a senior majoring in marketing at Stanford. Our group of 5 has been tight since freshman year. Me, Steve, Joe, Naomi, and Jenny. We were all really proud to be the top students in the class. Especially Jenny. She's the school beauty queen, super pretty and talented. Since it's senior year and studying is pretty tough, we'll just meet once a week. The meeting place will rotate at each person's home or apartment. 6 months ago, on a Sunday evening, that was our group's get-together before we started the stressful exam review period. The meeting was set for 8 p.m. at Steve's place. Steve's family was pretty well off, so he lives in a spacious house that his parents gave him for his 18th birthday. Everyone showed up on time, except Jenny. In the afternoon, he mentioned he'd be picking up some beer and told us not to be late. After 20 minutes of waiting, Jenny still hadn't shown up. We set the food on the table in Steve's bedroom and started chatting. We'd collect stories about studying, love, family, and more over the week and share them. More than 40 minutes after the meeting, Steve, Joe, and I swapped guys' stories. Naomi kept calling Jenny, but she still didn't answer. This girl is really like that, showing up and disappearing, coming and going all over the place. An hour had passed. The food on the table was a mess, and the stories were starting to dwindle. We had a few minutes of silence, each of us holding our phones. The power went out suddenly, so we grabbed our phones and turned on the flashlights. The room felt a bit eerie with the dim light. Everyone's faces looked half in shadow and half lit, and their expressions were pretty tense. Joe suddenly burst out laughing.
Are you scared? There are 4 of us here.
5 people, Steve muttered, but it was loud enough for all of us to hear. I mean, Jenny hasn't come. Steve looked a bit embarrassed, and we all exchanged smiles. We all knew Steve had a crush on Jenny for ages, but he never had the guts to say anything. Joe came up with a new idea. Each person would share a ghost story. I agreed. The spooky atmosphere made the ghost stories way more interesting. First up was Naomi. She told a story about a young guy who delivered pizza. When he got to the address, his friends jumped out and scared him. He was so scared that he had a heart attack and almost died. What kind of ghost story doesn't have a bit of suspense? Joe made fun of Naomi's story, while Steve and I just laughed. It was my turn next, followed by Steve's, and Joe kept complaining that the stories were too boring. But when it was his turn, his face looked confused and scared. Joe changed the subject and started gossiping about Jenny.
A friend told me that some rich guy confessed to Jenny this afternoon.
It's not surprising that someone confessed to her. Naomi was still annoyed with Joe about what just happened and replied with a frustrated tone.
But this guy's different. I heard he's gay. He just wanted to use Jenny as a cover-up.
Joe's story was even more engaging and dramatic than the ghost stories we'd just heard. Steve looked pretty pensive. It was true. He really liked Jenny, so he wasn't thrilled to hear that story. Steve stood up and said he needed to use the bathroom and would grab a bag to collect the trash. I told Naomi to call Jenny again before we wrapped up the party, but it was still just a long ring. After a few minutes of silence, Joe came up with another trick. He asked Naomi and me to hide and scare Steve when he came back. And that's how the plan we all thought fun and perfect was born. We set Joe's phone to record Steve's reaction and hide. Steve's footsteps got louder and louder as he entered the room, and he looked around with a pretty panicked expression. Steve quickly ran over to clear all the leftover food and trash from the table and opened it up. The 3 of us stood silently watching Steve without saying anything. It turned out the table was actually a box the whole time, and we had no idea. Steve stared at the box for a long time with a worried look, before quickly turning around and leaving. As soon as he left, we showed ourselves. The 3 of us didn't say a word, just looked at each other with confused expressions before walking over to the still open box. Naomi screamed right away, her voice sounding like it was about to snap. Joe and I clung to each other tightly, like we were trying to hold on for dear life. Inside the box was Jenny, her body twisted and her blue dress almost completely red. Steve came back with a sack in one hand and a sharp knife in the other. We looked at Steve, and he looked back at us with a stiff, unblinking gaze.
I probably need to grab 3 more sacks.
Steve growled and tightened his grip on the knife. I grabbed Naomi and pushed her to run quickly, shouting at Joe to get out of the way. After a while, Joe and I managed to subdue Steve, but we both ended up with some serious cuts on our hands. Naomi cried and called the police, and they arrived just in time. Naomi, Joe, and I were stunned to find out that Steve had murdered Jenny. He was the rich guy from Joe's story. Steve had multiple personalities, one of which liked Jenny, and another that was interested in a different guy at the same time. The trauma of having his sexuality exposed and being rejected by Jenny drove him to madness. So which personality did Steve use when he was with us over the past 5 years? We had so many great memories together, and the image of a kind, warm friend was completely shattered. Our close-knit group of 5 friends had to go through such a horrific and terrible experience. Naomi was deeply affected psychologically after seeing Jenny's body. Joe also became much quieter and more cautious. But in the end, we always supported each other, prayed for Jenny, and remembered Steve.
I've been an Uber driver for 3 years now, mostly working the night shift because the pay is better. That evening, around 11 p.m., it was raining. My phone rang with a trip request from Burnside Street. I accepted the ride and quickly drove to the pickup location. When I arrived, I saw a couple. The guy was tall and wearing a black hoodie. The girl was wearing a thin jacket with long hair down. They got in the car without saying a word. I greeted them, but the guy just nodded back. The girl kept her face down, her hair hiding her features. I drove for about 10 minutes on the highway. It was raining outside, so I drove slowly, heading east toward the city. The atmosphere in the car was weirdly heavy. I tried to focus on the road, but I glanced in the rearview mirror and saw the guy staring intently at the girl. His body was tense, his hands clenched into fists on his lap. The girl was still looking down, not moving. 5 more minutes went by, and the guy started to speak. His voice sounded strained, like he was trying to hold back. "Don't you have anything to say to me?" The girl was silent. Her hand was gripping the hem of her jacket. "How long are you going to stay quiet like this?" I saw everything. The girl shook her head slightly, her hair covering half her face. I don't want to fight right now. Tell me, what did you and him do?" The girl didn't answer and turned her face away. Her silence just made her boyfriend angrier. He leaned toward her, his voice a hiss. "Answer me. What did he give you that I didn't?" The girl flinched. "Stop! You're scaring me," he roared, slamming his hand on the seat. "If you were scared, you wouldn't have done it. You cheat. You liar." The girl started crying, turning her face to the window. Her boyfriend was breathing heavily. The air in the car was thick with tension. From the guy's words, I could figure out what had happened. He had caught her with another man, maybe right before they called my car. I didn't know the details, but it was clear this was a bad situation. "You think I'm stupid? You think I don't know what you're doing behind my back? You bitch. I gave you everything, and you have the nerve to do this?" He yelled even louder, pounding the seat repeatedly. Then suddenly the girl lifted her head, her voice sharp. "Shut up! Do you think acting like this gives you the right to hit me? Control, ordering me around, cursing, hitting. You do whatever your mood dictates. You've turned me into your puppet." The boyfriend froze for a moment. "I betrayed you? No. I ran away. I can't stand it anymore. I want to live like a human being. You always think you love me, but you really just love the feeling of controlling me." Hearing this, the boyfriend gritted his teeth, his face distorted with rage. For a few seconds, I thought things might calm down. But then, a slap so hard the whole car seemed to shake. The girl was thrown sideways, her head hitting the window. I flinched. My foot reflexively slammed the brake, and the car jerked hard. I turned back, trying to reason with him. "Hey man, calm down. Let's solve this gently." But instantly he roared, "Focus on driving, or are you her other boyfriend too?" I gripped the steering wheel, trying to stay calm after his threat. His face was beet red as he glared at me for a few seconds before turning back to the girl. I kept silent, faced forward, and drove faster. I just wanted this increasingly terrifying ride to end. Through the mirror, I saw the girl holding her face and crying. A few minutes passed in heavy silence. Then the girl spoke again. "Let's just end it." And then, without warning, he lunged. He bellowed like an animal. I turned around and was stunned to see a knife in his hand, and it was coming down on the girl. Both the girl and I screamed. Everything shattered into chaos. The sound of the knife stabbing and the overlapping screams. Blood splattered onto the seats and the windows. The metallic smell of blood filled the confined space. I gasped, my foot seemingly glued to the gas pedal. The car sped up, rocketing to nearly 80 miles per hour. I didn't hear the girl screaming, but instead weak moans. He kept going like an emotionless machine. I wanted to do something, but my body was paralyzed. And then, a loud siren from ahead snapped me out of it. I saw a police car patrolling slowly up ahead. Hope flared. I slowed down and drove straight towards it. I intentionally slammed my car into the back of the police cruiser and brought the car to a complete stop. Immediately, the maniac shifted his attention to me. He yelled, demanding that I drive away right now. His eyes were bloodshot, his mouth twisted like a demon. The blood-soaked knife in his hand was pointed directly at me. I knew I was about to die, but my survival instinct took over. I tore off my seatbelt, my fingers shaking as I pressed the button to recline the driver's seat all the way back. I yanked the door open, threw myself out, and tumbled onto the road. I screamed for help, my voice hoarse, blood smeared all over me. 2 officers from the patrol car rushed over. One pulled out his gun, and the other lunged to open the back door. The guy was still struggling, the knife still in his hand. The police officers subdued him and put him in handcuffs. I sank down onto the curb, shaking uncontrollably. The ambulance arrived about 10 minutes later. They took the girl out. She was still breathing, but weakly. Blood was seeping out everywhere. The girl was seriously injured and may lose some motor function. That crazy boyfriend was charged with attempted murder. I was diagnosed with severe PTSD by a doctor and had to undergo therapy. The girl survived. I, however, suffered from insomnia for months. I used to think that just working hard was enough to be safe. But in this city, no one knows what awaits them after every ride. I don't drive Uber anymore. But every time I see the light reflected on a wet road, I hear the screams in the rearview mirror. If you are driving at night, pay attention to the look in the eyes of the person sitting behind you. I'm Otis, and I've worked the night shift at Walmart for 3 years. I still remember that one work evening. It was drizzling, and the air was chilly. Otis, you'll handle the electronics aisle in aisle C today, okay? Susan, the night shift manager, said as I walked in. Yeah, no problem, I replied, even though I honestly hated that area. Aisle C was in the furthest corner of the store, usually deserted at night, and the security cameras didn't cover all the angles. That night, Kyle, the security guard, had called in sick with a sudden high fever. By around 1 a.m., the store was almost silent. I was feeling sleepy and decided to go make some coffee. That's when I saw him for the first time. A tall, middle-aged man, wearing a black coat that went down to his knees, even though it was quite warm inside the store. The dark blue backpack on his back looked strangely bulging. He stood at the end of the aisle, staring straight at me, sending a chill down my spine. I tried to ignore him and continued working. As I walked past the shelves in the tablet section, I felt a presence behind me. Hello, can I help you with anything? I asked, trying to keep my voice professional. The man didn't answer right away. He tilted his head, as if studying me. Could you show me these phones? He pointed to the glass display case showing the high-end phone models. I took out the keys to open the case, even though I felt uneasy. Handing him a phone, I noticed his hands were pale with small scars running along his fingers. How long have you worked here? About 3 years. Do you like working here? It's all right. Do you often work the night shift? Alone? He continued, his eyes fixed on me. We always have a few people working each shift. He chuckled. Of course. Safety first, right? He gave the phone back. Could you give me your phone number? in case I have more questions about the products. My heart beat faster. I'm sorry, but that's personal information. You can call the store's general line. I handed him a business card. His smile vanished, and he turned and walked away. I sighed in relief, but the uneasy feeling lingered. About an hour later, while I was organizing the DVD section, I felt someone watching me again. Turning around, I saw him standing at the end of the aisle, still with the backpack. I decided to go find a colleague. "Mike, there's a weird guy who keeps following me. Could you help me keep an eye on him?" "What guy?" "I don't see anyone." I turned back. The man had disappeared. He was just there, wearing a black coat, carrying a blue backpack. Mike shrugged. "Maybe he left. Don't worry too much, Otis." I went back to my area, this time carrying a box cutter in my pocket. The clock struck 3 a.m. It was my break, and I went to make coffee. The break room door suddenly opened. It was him. "Hello again, Otis." He read my name from my tag. "What a coincidence meeting you here." "This area is for employees only," I said, my hand reaching into my pocket. He closed the door behind him and slowly took off his backpack, placing it on the table. "I want to show you what I brought." I didn't wait any longer. With a quick move, I pushed him aside and ran out of the room. "Susan!" I yelled when I saw the manager at the checkout counter. "There's a man following me. He went into the employee break room." Susan looked at me skeptically. "Calm down, Otis." "What man?" "Wearing a black coat, carrying a blue backpack. He was asking me personal questions." Susan called Mike on the radio, and we checked the break room together. There was no sign of the man or the backpack. "Maybe you were just spooked," Susan said. "He was real," I insisted. "Hey, relax," Mike patted my shoulder. "Maybe he was just some weirdo." I started to doubt myself. Maybe I had overreacted. "I'll check the security cameras," Susan said. "But get back to work for now." The rest of the shift passed tensely. When it ended at 7 a.m., Susan called me into the office. "I checked the cameras, and there's no man wearing a black coat in any of your footage during your shift." "That's impossible," I protested. "He was there. I talked to him." Susan sighed. "Maybe you saw someone, and your tired mind filled in the details. Or maybe the cameras didn't catch him. Anyway, I need you back tonight. We're short-staffed." I went home in a state of panic. Despite my fear, I went back to Walmart that night. I needed the job, and I wanted to prove to myself that I wasn't paranoid. Susan greeted me with a forced smile while Mike avoided eye contact. "Otis, you'll be working in the stockroom tonight. We need inventory done." I nodded, relieved that I wouldn't have to face aisle C. After working for 2 hours, I realized I had forgotten my phone in my locker. As I walked through the dimly lit employee hallway, I heard Susan and Mike's voices from the camera surveillance room. "Can't keep this up. He saw the man. The thing with Kyle will come out." Susan's voice was strained. The name Kyle flashed through my mind like lightning. Kyle, the security guard who had called in sick because of... Tonight, when he's in the stockroom, lock the doors. Activate the fire suppression system. No one will know he's in there, Susan whispered. My body went rigid. Fragments of memories suddenly flashed. Blood on the floor, a blue backpack, a body being dragged away, and me witnessing it all. Now I remembered. The night Kyle disappeared, I had seen Susan, Mike, and 2 men in black dragging a heavy black bag out the back door. I had seen blood, and they had seen me. The next day, I remembered nothing, only a splitting headache. So who was that mysterious man? Was he trying to warn me? I sneaked to the employee entrance, punching in the code with trembling fingers. I sped back to my apartment, frantically throwing clothes, cash, and documents into a backpack. As I turned to leave, I jumped at a figure in the darkness of my living room. "Don't be afraid, Otis," a familiar voice said. The mysterious man stepped into the light. "I've been watching you to make sure you're safe." "Who are you?" I asked, clutching my car keys like a weapon. "My name is Evan, an undercover FBI agent." He presented a badge. "Kyle Moore was my partner. He infiltrated Walmart to investigate a criminal network, but he was discovered." "What were you going to show me?" "Evidence of Kyle's death and their operation. This Walmart is just a front for a drug smuggling ring across the Mexican border. Susan and Mike are key players." "Why haven't you arrested them?" "We need to know who's at the top." Kyle was close to the truth before they found him. Suddenly, police sirens wailed in the distance. "They reported you," Evan said. "Said you attacked a colleague and stole merchandise." "What do we do now?" "I have a plan," Evan said, opening the blue backpack. Inside were recording equipment, a micro camera, and a hard drive. "But I need you to be brave one last time." 2 weeks later, major news outlets reported a massive bust at a Walmart store on the outskirts of town. A multi-million-dollar drug smuggling ring had been dismantled, with Susan, Mike, and 17 others arrested, including the regional director of the supermarket chain. At FBI headquarters, I looked down at the Citizen's Bravery Medal I had just received, still not believing what had happened. I had learned that trusting yourself is more important than anything, especially when everyone around you tries to make you doubt yourself. And sometimes the strangest person in the room might be the only one you can trust. I'm Chrissy, and this is a story I wish had never happened. But sometimes, no matter how horrifying, the truth needs to be told as a warning. I grew up in a small town in Ohio where everyone knew each other, but instead of warm familiarity, I felt suffocated. My life was a series of days of scrutiny and ridicule. I was different from an early age. My curvaceous body, pale skin, and dark brown hair made me stand out, but not in the way I wanted. On the school grounds, I was not welcome. The laughter of friends is always accompanied by taunts. Chrissy, the walking refrigerator. I try to ignore it, but that cruelty doesn't stop at school. It followed me home, appearing at the family dinner table, in the concerned eyes of my mother and the cruel jokes of my cousins. By adulthood, things didn't get any better. I worked at the local supermarket, standing behind the counter, where customers glanced over as I wrapped the bags of snacks and candy they bought. I've learned to smile awkwardly, pretending it doesn't hurt me. But the truth is, I always felt like a failure. At age 24, my weight hit 300 pounds. I tried everything: keto, paleo, juicing, intermittent fasting, hitting the gym until my body fell apart. But the weight doesn't go away. It's like it's mocking all my efforts. When the doctor advised me to have gastric bypass surgery, I thought I had found hope. But after many consultations, they refused because my weight and overall health were too dangerous to do it. That disappointment was the final straw. One night, in desperation, I searched the internet and found the dark corners of the internet, the dark web. There, among the anonymous websites, I came across an ad for a miracle weight loss pill. Warning text from the seller: for desperate people only. At that moment, I suddenly felt a strong sense of comfort and sympathy. Without any hesitation, I accessed the ad and was happy to know that my weight had found a way out. 3 days later, the package I ordered through that advertisement was delivered. It is neat, tidy, but full of mystery, sealed with red wax printed with a strange symbol, a snake wrapped around its stomach. When opened, the dark red pills sparkled in the light, as if they held some dark power within. I just took a few seconds to think, and then swallowed a pill with joy and hope. Miraculously, my body began to change. The first day, I lost 5 pounds. 3 days later, that number increased to 10 pounds. The best part is that I can eat whatever I want: pizza, burgers, ice cream, and the weight continues to drop.
I stood in front of the mirror for hours, admiring my body. Although I lost a lot of weight, I didn't notice much change in my appearance. Anyway, I'm very happy and have even more hope. But that joy was extremely short-lived. A week later, I started to feel a burning sensation in my stomach, as if there was a fire burning inside. I drank water constantly, but my thirst never subsided. What was worse were the hunger pangs, worse than anything I had ever experienced. That first night, I rummaged through the refrigerator like a wild animal, my trembling hands cramming everything I could into my mouth in a frenzy. But the stomach is like a bottomless pit. As everything within my reach disappeared, my eyes filled with madness, searching for anything that could quench the bottomless hunger tormenting my body. The third night, in extreme hunger, I saw a mouse running across the kitchen. My eyes were glued to it, as if a primal instinct had just been activated. Before I could think, I rushed forward, grabbed it tightly in my hand, feeling its small body trembling. I don't think of anything. Squeezing the little animal tightly in my hand, my teeth sank deep into its soft body. The fishy smell flowed into my mouth, and I swallowed it all in a frenzy. When I realized what I had just done, I shivered and was horrified. But hunger quickly dispelled all logic. I chewed and swallowed in a frenzy, feeling neither disgust nor regret, only the intense, dark hunger that was controlling every action of mine. In the following days, I could no longer distinguish between what was food and what was inedible. I tore apart the box, chewing on the cardboard that still had food crumbs stuck to it. My teeth ached, but the hunger wouldn't let me stop. My body began to change horrifically. My cheeks hollowed out, my pale skin turned an ashen gray, and my eyes, bloodshot from lack of sleep, gleamed with a wild, predatory look. My fingers became bony, my nails cracked and covered in dried blood. Each time I looked in the mirror, I no longer recognized myself. All I saw was a monster, ready to devour more. My mother was the only one who never left my side. Even though I had destroyed myself, she stayed by my side, gentle like the morning sun. But she couldn't save me either. One night, as I tried to break into the fridge for the last remaining piece of cake, my mother stopped me. Her eyes were filled with worry, her voice pleading, "Chrissy, stop!" But I was no longer myself. I no longer saw my mother, only someone standing in the way of satisfying my hunger. I rushed at her, like a wild animal. My teeth sank into her arm. When I woke up, I found myself kneeling on the kitchen floor, my hands shaking, and my mother lying motionless with bleeding wounds. I felt like my soul was being torn apart, each piece pierced deep into my mind. Terror and guilt welled up, squeezing my chest to the point that I could only kneel there, hands shaking, tears mixing with the fear that I had become something less than human. After that incident, I was arrested and transferred to a mental hospital. Initially, doctors diagnosed me with a serious mental disorder. But after weeks of treatment, they discovered the real cause was a dangerous chemical in the pill I took. The treatment process is very difficult. They had to use medicine to neutralize the toxic substances in my body. The intense hunger gradually disappeared, along with the burning thirst. My mind gradually returned to clarity. My mother, despite being hurt physically and mentally, still forgave me and visited me every week. She said, "Chrissy, as long as you live, everything can be fixed." Those words keep me going. Now, after 2 years, I have become a different person. I am no longer obsessed with losing weight, but focus on taking care of my health and finding joy in the small things in life. If you are struggling with your body image, remember that there is no magical solution. Only perseverance and self-love can bring lasting results. Don't let the desire for change turn into destruction. Mental and physical health is always more valuable than anything else.
I did this scary survey at the ATM. I am in my third year of college. Living and studying alone in this busy city isn't easy, and I only get some help with tuition from my family. That night, I was walking home from my part-time job. I stopped by the ATM to grab some cash since I only had $10 left. I left out a sigh when I saw my account balance on the screen. I was about to pay rent and tuition at the same time, a problem I knew all too well and had dealt with before, but it was still tough for me. Thinking about it for a few minutes, I went ahead and hit the button to take out $100. After waiting a bit and still not seeing the cash come out, I looked up at the screen. Before you get your money, we're doing a customer survey, and you could win $10,000 for doing it. Do you want to take part? I was pretty surprised. This had got to be a new feature since ATMs are usually just for taking out cash. It didn't take me long to hit agree. $10,000 was a huge deal for me back then. There were 8 questions total, and I just had to say yes or no. Wow, making money has never been this easy, I said with a grin. First question, have you had any weird dreams lately? I frowned when I saw the question. It wasn't just a basic info survey like age or gender. Why do banks even do surveys like this? I thought about it and hit the no button on the screen. The loading icon spun for about a second before question number 2 popped up. Do you want to have a dream like that right now? I didn't think twice and just hit the no button right away. Don't turn back till you finish the survey. The red text kept flashing on the screen. I squinted a bit and took a couple steps back. I unexpectedly ran into someone and jumped, instinctively trying to turn back, but that flashing red text stopped me right in my tracks. I stared at it like I was trying to remind myself, not sure why I decided to believe it back then. I could hear clothes rustling, the steady breathing of the person behind me, and those heavy footsteps. It was the first time someone else was using this ATM at the same time as me. I glanced at the shadow of the person behind me, and he looked kind of chubby, but I wasn't sure. Are you dreaming? The next question popped up. Definitely not. Even though I was worn out from a long day at work, my mind was still pretty clear. Right after I hit the answer, the person behind me suddenly moved in closer. Feeling a bit uncomfortable and awkward, I scooted closer to the ATM, but it didn't help because the person just stepped closer to me. Are you sure? I was starting to regret doing these dumb surveys, but my $100 was still stuck in there. Right away, I caught this really fishy and gross smell. I felt warm, kind of damp breath on the back of my neck. The person was standing way too close, and the stench was definitely coming from them. Without thinking, I lifted my hand to cover my nose. It was almost too much for me to handle. Hey, could you back up and give me some space? I said firmly, but it didn't do a thing. Don't turn back until you finish the survey. I had to keep telling myself that to make my actions make sense. My hand was shaking and felt heavy. It took a lot of effort to press the yes button on the screen. Thanks for finishing the survey. Right after that, the $100 bill popped out. I was still shaking as I grabbed the bill and slowly turned around. There was nobody there. I swear my feeling was legit, super real. But I couldn't figure out how that person showed up and then just vanished. I stuffed the bill in my pocket and bolted out of there with everything I had. It felt like I was running away from my own fear, and there was nothing pushing me. When I got home, I crashed and fell asleep around 3 a.m. The next day, I asked my friends if they had seen that survey while getting cash, and they all said no. I looked online, and there were no other stories like that. I shoved that awful memory aside and ended up getting totally obsessed with all ATMs. I hit up the bank to take out some cash since I was broke. When the receptionist said my account balance was up to $10,000, my brain felt like it was going to explode. I asked her about that bank survey at the ATM, and she just looked confused. I asked the receptionist to check the transaction history, and no account had sent me that cash. Did it just pop up out of nowhere? Or did I have that money and not even know it? I walked out with a $10,000 balance and had no clue what to do next. I kept logging back in over and over, staring at the screen and counting every single number on my account balance. I really have $10,000. If this was a dream, that ATM totally gave me a weird dream, just like that first survey questions.
Over a decade ago, I was a college student on a tight budget. To make ends meet, I took on a few side gigs in addition to my part-time job. One of my favorites was house sitting and pet sitting. It was a good way to earn some extra cash. One time, a couple hired me to watch their house and their dog while they were on vacation. The gig was supposed to be for a little less than a week, but they offered to pay me for 2 weeks' worth of work. It was a great deal, and I couldn't pass it up. The house was amazing, but it was in a sketchy neighborhood known for break-ins and theft. I wasn't too worried, though. I figured as long as I kept the doors locked, I'd be fine. The first 4 nights were peaceful. I watched movies, took a bubble bath, and just enjoyed the nice house. The couple was scheduled to return on Thursday night, but while I was checking on their dog, they called to tell me their flight was delayed. They were going to stay in a hotel and come home the next morning. They asked if I could stay one more night, and I said yes. Then I called my dad to let him know, since I still lived with my parents. I was tired and went to bed early. I don't know how long I was asleep, but I woke up to the sound of breaking glass. I heard a loud crash, then what sounded like someone running in the hallway. The first thing I did was grab my phone and press the speed dial button for my dad. I hoped he would see the missed call and call me back. Then, I put the phone between the mattress and the headboard. If he did call, he'd be able to hear what was going on. Just then, a guy burst into the room. In the dim light, I could see him clearly. He had a knife in his hand. When he saw me, he raised the knife and started walking toward me. I need to mention that the break-ins in this area could get very violent. If you resisted or didn't cooperate, you could easily get seriously hurt or killed. I didn't have time to think. I just reacted. As he got closer, I kicked out with both feet, putting all my strength into it. I'm not a small guy. I'm over 6 feet tall and weigh more than 220 pounds. I've always been in good shape and worked out regularly when I wasn't in class or at work. The kick sent him flying backward into the wall. Luckily, the knife flew out of his hand too. Without hesitation, I rushed over, kneed him in the face, and then slammed his head against the wall. He fell to the floor, but then I heard the sound of a gun being cocked. I froze completely. Another guy was standing there, pointing a gun at my head. It was only a few seconds, but it felt like an eternity. I didn't dare move. He said something in broken English and told me to lie face down on the bed. I did exactly what he said. He threw a blanket over me. I curled up, hugging the wall, trying to shield my body with my arms and legs just in case. By this point, I had forgotten all about calling my dad. The guy I had kicked was still on the floor. A third guy walked into the room. They were talking to each other in a language that sounded like Portuguese. I didn't understand it, but I recognized it from a trip I'd taken to Mozambique, where the language is common. One guy helped the injured one, and the other started stuffing things into a bag. Suddenly, I heard a car screech to a halt outside. Then someone started yelling. It was my dad. The 3 guys inside the house panicked. They bolted out the back door and tried to climb over the fence. My dad started shooting. I'm pretty sure he was trying to miss on purpose. He could have easily hit them if he wanted to. When I got outside, my dad called the police. By the time they arrived, I had calmed down a bit. I went looking for the couple's dog. I couldn't find it anywhere. I borrowed my dad's flashlight and went into the backyard. In the corner of the yard, I saw him lying motionless. My heart sank when I realized he was dead. The police later confirmed that the dog had been poisoned. The thieves must have done it to get into the house without a problem. I cried for the dog and felt a deep sense of anger. The next morning, the couple returned. When the police and I told them what had happened, they were in shock. The wife burst into tears when she saw her dog. Her husband held her and was shaking with a mix of anger and grief. Watching them kneel beside the dog, my heart ached. I felt a pang of guilt, even though I knew I had done everything I could. About 7 or 8 months later, a detective called me. They had caught the guys and needed me to identify them. I told him I didn't get a good look at their faces in the dark, and after the gun was pointed at me, I was hiding under the blanket and didn't see anything. He said they had fingerprints and wanted to show me the evidence first. When I got to the police station, it wasn't like in the movies. There was no one-way glass or hidden room. They brought the 3 men in, and they glared at me with pure hate in their eyes. The ringleader's name was Sambo. His gaze was the most chilling thing I have ever seen. After we left the room, the detective gave me his file. I was stunned. He had 4 counts of murder, nearly 10 counts of attempted murder, multiple aggravated assault charges, assaults on women, and over 100 counts of theft and breaking and entering. The officer told me that if I hadn't acted so fast that night, the outcome could have been very different. A few days later, I got a call from the detective. Somehow, Sambo had escaped from prison. The detective advised me to be careful, but I wasn't too worried. The incident didn't happen at my home, and I had a different car, so it would be hard for him to find me. Plus, I had my license and always carried a gun with me. Even though it has been many years, I'll never forget that night. It taught me that sometimes a few seconds of pure instinct can change your life, and that a father's love can save you from the worst. 9 years ago, on a fall afternoon, I met Jack Sparrow at a Dollar Tree store. But that captain was not a famous hero. He was a living, breathing nightmare. I was 13 at the time, living in a small town in San Bernardino County, California. I remember it was close to Halloween. My family's atmosphere was as spooky as the holiday decorations. My parents were in the process of getting a divorce, and tense arguments happened every day. They didn't care if I was there to witness it. I became a quiet kid, retreating into my own world. I didn't have any friends because I was so introverted. So I spent most of my free time drawing. I would draw everything I could imagine in all my dreams. I saved every penny to buy drawing supplies. The Dollar Tree made me feel more comfortable than I did at home. It was 3 blocks away. I usually biked there 2 or 3 times a week, and each time I felt excited thinking about the new art supplies I would find. That day was after school. I was excited to go to Dollar Tree because I knew the store would be empty at that time. After I parked my bike, I walked into the store and went straight to the craft section, which was having a sale. I was holding a set of color pencils and a few bottles of paint. I was planning my next drawing when I suddenly heard a hiccup behind me. I turned around and saw a man standing very close behind me. He was dressed up as Jack Sparrow. His long brown hair was tied in messy dreadlocks. A red scarf was wrapped around his head, a dirty white shirt, and a brown leather jacket. One of his eyes had an eye patch on it, and the other was bloodshot. The strong smell of alcohol coming from his clothes made me take a few steps back. "Sorry, I didn't see you there." At first, I thought he was just role-playing, but his continuous hiccups and the way he was swaying made me realize he was drunk. He stared at me. "What do you think of this outfit?" he asked in a slurred voice. "It looks like Jack Sparrow," I replied shortly. I just wanted to end this conversation quickly. His mouth dropped open in astonishment, as if I had said something unbelievable. He continued to look at me with a crazy look in his eyes. "No, it's not. I'm the real Jack Sparrow. I'm the captain." I didn't know how to react. A small laugh escaped my mouth. I felt both amused and a little confused by his attitude. "Answer your captain," he yelled, his voice threatening. The mix of annoyance and fear made me snap. "You're the worst Jack Sparrow I've ever seen." After saying that, I turned around and quickly walked away. My heart was pounding in my chest. Luckily, he didn't follow me. A few minutes later, I went to the checkout counter to pay. I looked around the store and felt relieved when I didn't see that strange man anywhere. I finished paying and walked outside. That's when the real nightmare began. I remember exactly where I had parked my bike, next to the trash can. But now, my bike was no longer there. I looked around in confusion, and then a laugh suddenly rang out, followed by the sound of a bicycle bell. I was sure it was my bike. I was determined not to go home without it. With shaky steps, I walked into the parking lot. There were a few cars scattered around. At the end of the parking lot, a figure was sitting on a bicycle. It was that scary Jack Sparrow again. It wasn't hard for me to recognize that outfit. I tried to stay calm. "That's my bike. Give it back to me." When he heard my voice, he slowly turned his head and suddenly yelled, "You need to find yourself a girl." After he said that, he started pedaling, riding straight toward me. I screamed and turned around, running for my life. Behind me, his crazy laughter rang out like a demon's voice. All I felt was panic. "I'm gonna get you! I'm gonna get you!" He kept yelling behind me. I ran out of the parking lot and onto the highway. I ran in the opposite direction of the Dollar Tree, hoping to find someone who could help. His laughter got louder and louder. He was getting closer and closer, clearly enjoying this game of intimidation. I was getting tired, and my running speed slowed down. I was about to collapse in the middle of the road when I saw a large truck approaching me from a distance. I started waving my hands frantically. "Stop! Please stop!" I yelled toward the truck. The driver noticed me and honked his horn. I turned back and saw the man had stopped pedaling. He looked at me, then at the truck. When he realized the truck was going to stop, he looked angry. He slowly got off the bike and kicked it really hard. The bike fell to the ground and the bell shattered. Then he turned and ran to the other side of the road and disappeared. When the truck driver let me and my broken bike in, I was completely exhausted. My shirt was soaked with sweat, and I was out of breath as if I had just run a marathon. I mumbled a thank you and gave him my home address. The driver was an older man. He looked at me with concern, but didn't ask any more questions. Other than giving me directions home, I didn't say anything. When he dropped me off in front of my house, I thanked him again for his help and went straight to my room. I didn't go out for almost a week after that. Every time I heard a bicycle bell on the street, my heart would pound, and I would get goosebumps all over my body. The reason I never shared this experience with anyone is because I knew no one would take it as a real threat. People would think that crazy guy was just joking, or worse, they wouldn't believe me. A 13-year-old kid talking about being chased by a guy dressed as Jack Sparrow sounds ridiculous. But I know what I went through was real, and not a single night goes by that I don't have nightmares about that crazy captain. He's riding a bicycle, chasing me in the dark, with his crazy laughter echoing endlessly. My name's Richard, 35 years old. I'm working for a construction company, major in structural engineering. 2 years ago, I was assigned to researching on a dismantle of a building. It's a building in the outskirt of the city, in the eviction area. The building was large and very sturdy, constructed some 15 years earlier. In order to dismantle it safely, I'd need to study the site in order to calculate the amount of explosive used and in which area so the collapse would be at the least risks. My supervisor had greenlit on the permission to stay in the building and facilitate the structural study. The day I moved in, 2 tenants welcomed me in, a mother and son. The mother name's Kate, 66 years old, and her son Jim, 41 years old. They lived here for a long time and seemed to understand the building very well, even providing me with very detailed structural maps. Jim was pretty gentle and polite, while Kate, in stark contrast, was rather rude and seemed to ignore me at every turn.
My accommodation was a room on the third floor. I scoured the entire building, and I'd admit, this house architecture was really strange. Advancing to the second floor, the walls were sunken down with a strange cave-in, about 6 feet high, 3 feet wide, and about 1 foot sunken in. Within the sunken part hung a bundle of roses. I came closer to take a better look, man. The wall there was like at least 3 feet. I asked Jim about this disparity and why no one bothered fixing it. He just smiled softly. That's where my dad passed away when the building came down to the final phase. An accident, and he's buried in the cement. I was really shocked at his revelation, while Jim wasn't so thrilled about it. Moving up to the third floor, I asked Jim further about the architecture and the building blueprints. As far as I was told, the architecturer who designed this building is Christopher, a rather famous one in the field. Jim told me that 15 years ago, Christopher had vanished without a trace. All police attempts came up empty-handed, and all of them agreed that Christopher left behind a rather mysterious building that even them couldn't crack it. Jim told me about Christopher's old room in the highest floor and told me that this room was off-limit. I agreed and returned to my room, starting with the instruments and study of the basic layout. However, in the evening when I was taking a shower, I could hear sounds coming from behind the glass. However, upon checking everything, I couldn't find anything unusual at all. At night when I sleep, that sound once again rang out. It felt kinda like someone's calling me or calling for help. Later the following morning, I went downstairs and met Kate in the kitchen. I asked her whether there was anyone else residing in the building and was told that the three of us was the only residents here. After breakfast, I began my observation to mark up the foundations for demolition. When I made my way to the highest floor, I remembered Jim's order. But I was curious, so I ventured further into Christopher's old room. There was a lot of architecture books there, and quite a few personal stuffs that weren't coated in dust at all, as if it had been regularly used. I was rummaging through the stuffs until a voice boomed from behind me. "You just forgot what I've told you already." Jim stood in the doorway, looking at me, smiling. Yet I felt so uneasy by that smile. I told him that I just wanted to look for additional information of the building that'd help in my survey. After leaving the room, I felt very strange about Jim. When I was strolling on the second floor hallway, I saw Kate standing facing the wall that her husband died on. She brought over a fresh bundle of roses, hands over the deflated area. She must have missed her husband dearly. After realizing my gaze upon her, she threw back her cold gaze upon me. She demanded I stop all demolition attempts, because she'd rather die in the house rather than seeing it demolished. I could have no way to console her about it. After all, it's what I had to do. That night I went to bed rather late, yet suddenly I heard someone wailing and begging. Walked out of the room, I was surprised to know that it was Kate. She was kneeling and crying on the deflated wall commemorating her husband's demise. She begged him not to come back for her anymore. The pain in her voice made me shudder. I thought there's some crazy secrets that was hidden in this very household. At night, I woke up due to a sudden sense of cold, enough to make me shiver. When I was able to open my eyes, I realized that I was locked up in a very tight space, with slippery walls surrounded. I was in full panic, slammed hard on the walls and screamed aloud, hoping for someone's attention. Suddenly the ceiling opened up, came over with blinding white light shining down upon me. A shadow appeared, quietly looked down upon me, despite my ceaseless pleading for help. That shadow didn't say anything, but just pouring down a thick substance. Only when it came and touched me that I realized it was all cement. The caustic wet cement seemed to have eating through clothes and body. The pain was unbearable, and I could only scream and hope it would go away. Until the moment the cement rose overhead, and the substances streamed through all my orifices. It was until that I jolted completely awake, the caustic taste still linger in my mouth. It was all just a bad nightmare, and thanks to that, I was unable to go back to sleep. Later that morning, I sneaked back to Christopher's room to search for additional information relating to this household. Before I was able to come in, I realized the room was occupied. It was Jim. He's rather, versed around this part of the house. Jim went to the corner of the room and pushed on some hidden furniture there, revealing a large hole within. I carefully marked the location in my memory to avoid Jim's detection. A few days later, I tried to act as normal as I could in front of the two tenants. Every location for demolition charges and building foundations had been made and mailed back to the company's headquarters for processing. Kate was becoming more and more cold and rude, while Jim was acting rather relaxed. On my last day there, I snuck up on the secret chamber in Christopher's workroom when everyone had fallen asleep. It was a rather small, dampened place with 2 observation holes carved out into my bedroom and bathroom. So, Jim had always kept me under his watch from the start. When I was deep in my thought, I saw Jim sneaking to my bedroom, a sharp knife on his hand. He slowly made his way to my bed, swinging it high. He swiftly lifted up my sheet for a strike, but then stopped when couldn't see me there. Those actions were in stark contrast with the gentle smile that man often wore on his face. It was when I realized that Jimmy Guy was no joke. He's truly a serial killer, hidden in plain sight. Jim angrily stormed to the bathroom. After a deep breath, he quickly ran out of the room. I knew where he's heading and placed myself accordingly. Right across Christopher's room, I could hear raging footsteps getting closer and closer. So I did the only logical thing I could, closed the door shut and locked it from behind. The door suddenly bulged up by strong impacts. Okay, that guy was really into me now. I thought, braced myself in the short corner behind the door. Open up! This is the police. Hearing that, I knew that I would be safe and opened up the door to the authority. So as a precaution, I called the police before venturing here to this door. Now safe, I could see the police arresting Mrs. Kate and Jim. Initial diagnosis concluded that he's suffering a serious case of schizophrenia. When the building was manually dismantled, workers there discovered a small hidden section right behind my room. In there was a dying old man. That was Christopher. After recovery, he told that he was the grandfather of Jim. That twisted man had buried his own father alive in concrete and illegally imprisoned his grandfather for 15 years. I didn't dare to imagine what would become of me if I hadn't alerted the police before going to the room